Welcome to Aperitif. 15 minutes with a specialty cocktail, a delicious nibble, and an iOS app dev lesson. I'm Karen Burns, and this week Flying Start presents Interface Builder Basics while we enjoy a mustardy lentil salad and an Aperol Spritz. Hi, I'm Karen Burns, founder of Flying Start. Thanks so much for joining me again for this episode of Aperitif. Today we're going to have a lot of fun. We're making lentil salad and also a great drink called Aperol Spritz, which is the awesomest summer drink ever, if I do say so myself. I love Aperol Spritz. I think they're fantastic. And we're going to be doing our last lesson. We're going to be talking about interface user basics, and we're doing our very last lesson before our first app, which we're doing next week, and I'm super excited to share that with you then. But I do have to say, next week, I think it's gonna be a little bit longer than 15 minutes because we're gonna need a lot of practice. So I hope you're willing to stick with me, and thanks so much for joining me this week. I hope you enjoy it, and I will talk to you soon. Back in 1994, I was in culinary school and I was doing my internship at a French bistro here in Chicago called Le Bouchon, and we had an appetizer called bistro salads, and this is one of those bistro salads. So the salad that we're going to make today is a lentil salad. You will start with your lentils, which should be cooked all the way through. Usually lentils are a little tricky. These are French lentils, so they're very tiny. It depends on the size of your lentils and how you're cooking them, but I just cover them in water and cook them until they're tender. We also have mayonnaise, an onion. You could use a shallot too. Shallot is preferable, actually. I did not have one. Some fresh thyme, some Dijon mustard, and some red wine vinegar. We're going to dice our onion very small. We're going to do a tiny dice. It's called a brunoise. When you're cooking, you also have to keep in mind the proportions. So you're thinking about the size of the lentil versus the size of the garnish. So you want to make sure that the onion's small because the lentils are small. Take the leaves of thyme off the stem and give them a quick fine chop. Now it's time for the sauce. We're going to take our mayonnaise and we're going to add about a tablespoon of Dijon mustard and some red wine vinegar. Mix that up very well. Make sure it's seasoned, salt and pepper. Also make sure your lentils have a nice flavor. If you did not put enough salt in the cooking water, make sure you season them now. Mix it all together. I like to let it sit for a little while before I serve it. And your tasty lentil salad is ready to go. I usually just serve it with some crostini or sometimes just plain baguette. And of course, you're going to have a cocktail. So let's get ready for our Aperol Spritz, shall we? The Aperol Spritz has 3 ingredients. Prosecco, you can have any Prosecco. I buy the cheap stuff. Aperol and soda. Fill a glass with ice and fill it about a third of the way with Aperol. Top that up with some Prosecco. Then you're just going to put a splash of soda to lighten it up and a squeeze of lime or orange. And now you're all liquored up and ready to code. So how about we get the show on the road? Here we are already in week 8. We are on Interface Builder Basics. When you are making an app, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can write all the code by hand, or with Xcode, you can also use the Interface Builder. The Interface Builder is a visual way to help you create. I like the Interface Builder better only because it is a little bit better, I think, for beginners. Some people are die-hard coders that will only use the coding aspect and like to do everything programmatically versus using the interface or using storyboards. However, I am all about ease of use, and I'm also a visual learner, so I like to use the Interface Builder. Before we do anything, let's open a brand new project. So you remember how to do this. You'll go to the File menu, and you can click New Project, a single view app, and we're going to name it IB Basics. Today I'm going to show you how to add a button to your user interface on the initial view controller. And I'm going to show you how to set up that button with an outlet and also an action. If you go to the project and open up main.storyboard in the navigation area, we see first on the left-hand side the document outline, which shows a list of all the scenes and UI elements that we have in this storyboard. Whenever we add a scene or any element, you'll see it here. The canvas is the backdrop of the storyboard. This is where all the scenes are organized. The scene is a representation of the screen of your app. And finally, the view controller, which manages all the views and coordinates all of the information between the data and what your user is actually seeing. We can tell this is the initial view controller because the arrow is pointing right to it, the arrow here on the left-hand side. The initial view controller is the first view controller your user sees when he or she opens up the app. Last week, I told you about accessing documentation, and I also mentioned that there are practice projects that you can use that are on the Apple website. And if you follow the link on page 79 for Build a Basic UI right here in the book, it will take you to a place that will walk you through a sample project and help you build a basic user interface. I highly suggest that you try this out. It's a great exercise. Back to our storyboard. If you want to adjust the size of the scene, you can use your trackpad and use 2 fingers and either pinch in or pull out to adjust the size. So we can see here we're in our initial view controller. We have the arrow pointing. Also in our document viewer, if you click the little gray arrows, you have more information. So for example, as we add more things to our view controller, they will show up there. Speaking of adding things, we are going to add a button. So go up here to your object library where the plus sign is and click and drag down a button. Let's put it right here in the center. On the right-hand side in the utilities area, there's a series of buttons. So we're going to go to the identity inspector, which is this one right here. The identity inspector tells you about all of the properties that are related to an object's identity, for example, the class. We haven't talked about classes yet. We will talk about classes in a future lesson, but that's where you would find that information here. Next, we have the Attributes Inspector. And the Attributes Inspector is where you can change your text. You can change the look of your text, for example, the font, the color, the boldness. You can add an image to a button. You can do all of that stuff here in the Attributes Inspector. Let's see if we can change the size here on our font. So we will increase it to 25. And then let's change the color to red. As I mentioned earlier, you can do things programmatically as a coder, or you can use the interface builder. There's 2 ways you can actually, and I'll show you this other way to change the font color. Here we're going to do it using the interface builder. We'll just go right here, we'll choose red, and it will change the font. But later I will show you how to do it programmatically. Now our button says button, but it's in red. So we're going to build and run our app. And we see the word button is in our simulator here, but it doesn't do anything yet when we click it. So of course, good app design, when you have a button and someone clicks it, something should happen. So how can we make something happen? Well, that's where outlets and actions come in. In order to create either of these, you will have to open up the Assistant Editor. So you can go to the top and in the menu, click Editor, and go down to Editor and click Assistant. Now that brings up the code for the view controller, which is what we want to work on. This is where we're going to connect our outlets and our actions from the interface builder right here to the code. An outlet is a connection between the visual and the code. So between interface builder and the actual code, that's an outlet. An action is the code that will execute when an interaction takes place. So for example, when your user touches that button, what happens next? That is the action. When we add things to our user interface, we have to add an outlet to the code to make sure that they show up and they work properly. So in order to do that, what we do, when I say adding things, what I mean is like images or buttons or labels. All of those things need to have an outlet in the code. So what we do is we click on the object. So here we click on the button, control click on the button and then drag. And you'll see the blue line that will connect it. We drag it right here to underneath, right inside the class, after the class statement and before the view did load. Once we get to the spot where we want to drop it, we release the button. And it says here, outlet. We want to make sure the connection is set to outlet. The object, of course, is the view controller. We've got that already. The type is UI button. And we want the storage to be clicked to or set to strong. So let's name this button My Button. Once you click Connect, you will see on the document outline that your button no longer just says button, it says My Button, which is the title of your button. Let me show you how to change the color of the text programmatically. So we're in the View Did Load. We put My Button, because that's the name of our button, and we're going to be looking for setting the title color. So at the very top, it says Set Title Color. So we do My Button dot set title color, and we replace color with .red. That's our UI color. And our state is .normal. Again, we've done this already in the interface builder. This would be if you would need to do this without using the interface builder. So this will also change the set or the title color to red. So we build and run, and we see that our button still doesn't do anything. So we need to put in an action in order for the button to do something when it's pressed. We're going to control, click, and drag. So we'll get the blue line. We'll drop it right here underneath the My Button, the color that we set. And instead of doing an outlet, we are going to select action. So the connection is an action. We're going to call this button pressed, and we're going to connect. Let's build and run and see if that worked. Well, so the button presses, but we don't know if anything else would happen. So for example, if we want to have the button, when people press the button, it goes to a new page, right? Well, we don't have any other scenes right now, so we don't have another page. So we don't really know if this button is working yet. A way to test to see if it's working is we can have the button print something when it is pressed, print something to the console. So we are going to add a command inside of our button pressed function, and we're going to add a print command. We put in the button was pressed inside of quotes, and every time the button is pressed, it will print this sentence into our console. So let's build and run again and see if this happens. Bring up the console on the bottom, and look at that. It works. It's printing the button was pressed to our console. So we know that the connection, the action is working. Now I've just noticed something. Not sure if you noticed this as well, but whenever I bring up the simulator, my button is not centered in the middle of the screen. And so I've just realized why. My simulator is set to view in iPhone SE, the second edition, but right here on my storyboard, I have it set for iPhone 11 Pro. So I have to make sure those two match in order to get a realistic view of what my app's going to look like. So let's change our storyboard viewer to iPhone SE second generation and build and run and see if that's better. Perfect. Look at that. When you click the button, it prints to the console and it is perfectly centered. So it looks like we fixed that. And there you go. So we've added a button, we've made it work, we understand a little bit more about storyboards and about Interface Builder. I hope you feel a little bit more comfortable. I really suggest you read pages 79 through 91 in App Development with Swift by Apple, again, downloadable on Apple Books. It is free before you do the lab and the quiz. And I will see you then next week for our project, our guided project called Light. We will build our first app. Just a reminder, all the resources for today's lesson, as well as past lessons, are located at getaflyingstart.com, app Apéritif. Thanks for joining Flying Start and me, Karen Burns, to learn about Interface Builder basics in Xcode. I hope you enjoyed the lentil salad and Aperol Spritz. Next week, we will begin with our very first app. And until then, I hope you have a great week.